to join us. I'm happy to present Lou and Nick from HeadSafe Football. In light of the changes, the FA rule changes, with the heading in football in the youth to up to ages under nines, just wanted to share with you some wisdom from HeadSafe Football, and the science behind the reasons why them changes have took place. Obviously everyone's accepted the changes, but don't necessarily know why these changes have took place. And I think it's really important for us to understand why, as well as the how and the what and the maybes. So Lou, Nick, can I hand over to you? Nick and Lou have said it's an interactive session, so please feel free to input what you can, whenever you need to. Lou, Nick, over to you.
Thanks very much, Claire. Yeah, just to reiterate, thank you very much for giving up your evening. I know that after a long day of work to then log back on is an effort sometimes, so I really appreciate you attending this evening. And also thanks to Claire for saying that we're wise. I've never been called wise before. But yeah, just to go over the kind of house rules, we want this to be interactive. We would like you to ask questions. If that means that you'd rather feel comfortable typing in the chat, we'll monitor the chat. So please do that. If you just want to turn your camera on and unmute and chip in, we'd really like to hear from you, hear your opinions, hear your thoughts. So the more you can interact with us, the more enjoyable the evening will be. Don't hold back. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'll ask Nick or Claire to give me a thumbs up if that's worked. Wonderful, thank you. So this evening is HeadSafe Football's presentation to club welfare officers. If you're not a club welfare officer, welcome. It's for everybody. We were just targeting the information specifically at those roles, but this will be interesting for everybody, I hope. So first of all, HeadSafe Football, just to let you know who we are. We're a UK-based charity. Our HeadSafe education programme is unique. It's the only one of its kind. Nobody else has a HeadSafe curriculum at the moment within the UK. And the objective of it is to mitigate the risks that are incurred through repetitive head impacts. And our core message at the heart of everything that we do is just to reduce heading in training. And if you take nothing more away from this evening's presentation, that one sentence is really at the heart of everything we do. It's reduce heading in training. We currently as a charity do have programs in other countries. We're working in 6 countries and we work with all stakeholders within football, and particularly we are targeting the grassroots and the young people. Okay, but we work with PE teachers, trainee PE teachers, football coaches, football players, football parents, club welfare officers, and really anyone within the football community that is willing to listen to our message and take on board our advice and protect young players, which is what we're seeking to do. So I'm Lou. Thanks very much for having me this evening. My role within football, I have a few hats. I was a football player. I'll say 1987. Let's not go into that. But I was a football player. Just got asked to play football on the weekend, 11-a-side for the first time in 25 years. They were very short of players and clearly desperate. And I can't walk properly today. So still playing football recreationally and for fun. I'm a football coach this season to 3 girls football teams, under 10, under 11, and an under 11 girls team that we're putting into the under 10 mixed league. And that's with Newquay Football Club. I'm down in the West Country in Cornwall, on the north coast of Cornwall. I'm a football parent. I have 3 children all playing football. And then with HeadSafe Football, I'm a brain health educator, working with the different stakeholders within the football community. And my estimation is I might have headed the ball about 7,500 times over my lifetime. Nick, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. And if anyone in the chat, if they want to say where you're from and what your roles are and things like that, so that we can understand exactly some of the questions that might come and some of the things that we can help you with. So my background, I'm from Mask, so I am from the northeast. I played England under 18s a long time ago, chose to go to university in America, was enticed back to Middlesbrough Football Club, was an executive there, And I have 2 charities that I work with, coach across continents. We had International Day of Play today, where we think about 3.5 million children were playing our games from the curriculum around the world in countries like India, Kenya, Africa, all of those sorts of places. And I'm involved with HeadSafe Football because unfortunately my father, Bill Gates, who played for Middlesbrough for 13 years, headed the ball too many times and died last year of CTE. So we've been part of this journey to his legacy that he'd asked for a number of years ago was, could he be someone that could help young people in the future avoid too many headers with the potential of what the problems could be. So, and I'm also a massive, obviously, because my dad played for Middlesbrough, I'm a massive Middlesbrough fan. So I have seen the team for tonight, and at 7:15, I'll be definitely looking at the scores from there. And I would think, as we've done the calculations, at least 20,000 headers in my lifetime of a player.
Wonderful. Thanks, Nick. Okay, so that's us. Thank you for those who are putting into the chat your role within football, the age group that you coach, the area that you coach in. So keep putting that information in the chat for us. We really appreciate it. Next slide. The arrows didn't work, Claire. I'm going to go back to the mouse. Right. Okay. So I think we are all aware, or maybe that's the first question actually. Are we all aware that the FA have brought in new rules for under 7s, under 8s and under 9s this season? I would imagine we are, if that's the age group you're coaching. If it's the age group you're not coaching, this information may well have passed you by. But the FA have brought in new rules, and those rules are to remove deliberate heading from the game. And the way that they're able to do that is they've also got rid of throw-ins. So a lot of people are aware that the FA have brought in this rule to get rid of deliberate headings. They hadn't appreciated that throw-ins have gone as well. Now, logic would suggest if you throw the ball's in the air. So the likelihood of a header taking place is quite high. And so we've gone to pass-ins and dribble-ins from the sideline. That's with the under 7s, under 8s and under 9s. Now, they will take those rules with them over the next 3 seasons. So this season, the following season, it will be under 10s and below. And then the following season, it will be the under 11s and below. Now, that will mean that in 3 seasons' time from now, there will be no deliberate heading in football for primary age children in the UK, in England, which is in line with the heading guidance, which has been in place for training for a long time. There's always been a bit of a conundrum to me that we can't do heading in training, but they do it in matches. So a skill they're supposed to be performing, we can't coach. Whereas now the rules of the game actually correlate with the heading guidance, which I think makes a lot more sense. So these are the new rules. Just give me I don't know if you can do like a virtual thumbs up on your screen. Obviously, you've all got your cameras turned off at the moment. Are you able to do a virtual thumbs up to let me know if you're aware of the rule changes? I don't usually work in Teams. So, I've got a thumbs up in the, fantastic. We got it in the chat.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Ian. That's wonderful. So we are aware of the rule changes. Brilliant. So are there any questions about the rule changes? So we're aware of them. Does anyone have any questions about them? Looking from the chat, I think you're mostly coaching the older age group. I haven't actually seen anyone in the chat that's working. Oh, no, I did see someone with under 10 girls, because I remember thinking that's the age group I coach. Well, if you have any questions, I'm going to move on. If you have any questions about the under 9 rule changes, please put them into the chat and we'll pick those up later. Okay. Now, heading guidance. I have done the Introduction to Football course just before COVID, just before lockdown. It was the old level 1, I think, the Introduction to Football course. And at no point in my Introduction to Football course did anyone mention the fact that there was a heading guidance. Okay. I'm currently very close to finishing my UEFA C, which is for old money, the level 2. And at no point during my training has anyone mentioned heading guidance. So we've got this guidance, it exists. It's great that it's there, but I don't think the information is necessarily being translated to the coaches, of whom I am one. So that's one of the issues. The other thing with the heading guidance, it's really good that we've got some idea of how many headers we should do, but that's also quite difficult to monitor. So if I look at this screen, for example, at the under 13 age group, heading remains a low priority. You can do 1 session a week with a maximum of 5 headers. Now, at under 13s, if I've got 11 aside, I've got 11 kids and they're allowed to do 5 headers each. How do I monitor that? Like Billy's done 3, Jack's done 4. I don't think Kieran's done any. I mean, I can't keep those numbers in my head, and Billy, Jack and Kieran aren't counting. Their parents aren't counting. So as much as I think it's really good that we have guidance, and of the 210 FAs around the globe, less than 10% have any guidance about heading. So we're there, we've got something in place that's brilliant. We're not necessarily sharing it, and it's really difficult to actually monitor. So, you know, I'd love to hear your thoughts, your coaches. By the looks of things in the chat, where a lot of people are coaches, what do you think about the guidance? How do you use it? How is it useful to you, or is it not useful? Do you ignore it? What's your thoughts on heading guidance? Let's have some. Feel free to go in the chat if you want to unmute and you know, turn your screen on and have a chat. Would be really lovely to hear from you. So Ian Firth had never had the guidance before. Oh, hello.
Hello, I'm James from Tees.
Hi, James.
Hello there. So we had a tournament on Sunday just gone with about 12 teams, and there was heading for the under 10s. Now we were saying there wasn't heading for under 10s. So I look after under 10s, on 212s and under 15s. So I'm really unclear about it, because it's come out and it's just changed. So really, I'd like to really knuckle down with what is allowed and what is not allowed, so that I'm covered.
Absolutely.
Really.
I think where the confusion might have come in, James, is when they were doing the research to do the rule change, they trialed it with under 12s. So they trialed these rules and would it work and wouldn't it work with an older age group. And to do the trial, the whole league had to buy into the process. You couldn't have one team say, oh, we'll do it, and other teams say they wouldn't. And then you got to a match day and you had these different rules. So entire leagues had to voluntarily buy into the trial. And that was done at under 12. Now the trial's over. The FA have decided to change the rules, but they're bringing it in, they're staggering it over the next 3 seasons. So the rule change is only for under 7s, under 8s and under 9s. Where that confusion might have come in is maybe some of the teams that you've played or a coach were involved in the trial process. So I hope that helps to explain it to you. Does anyone have anything they want to kind of share in terms of James's comment for the under 10s and being confused? Is anyone else in a similar situation?
Hi, it's Kieran from York. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, hear you well.
Yeah, I haven't got a camera, unfortunately. But our league has stated that I think they were part of the trial, and they're going to leave it that heading will only be allowed at under 12 and up. So for me, it's the primary age, as you've got there, that heading won't be allowed in matches, or deliberate heading won't be allowed in matches. Yeah. So for me, it's quite clear that it makes it a bit easier.
Well, I really appreciate that, Kieran, because what I hadn't realised then were that certain leagues that maybe were involved in the trial previously were going to continue using those rules. So that I've learned something new today. That's interesting to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, we have the York leagues that are continuing because they trialled the no deliberate heading last season, so they're continuing with the same age group, if you like, up to the under 12s. Whereas Tees FC would be the TGFA, so they were trialing it last season up to the under 12s, but this year have reverted back to the FA rules, which is under 7s, under 8s and under 9s this season. Just to answer James's question.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, that's quite so, James. It's maybe not quite as black and white as I had assumed, and maybe there are some, as Kieran's just quite clearly said, there are some leagues who are choosing to keep the rules from the trial. So I'm sorry if I haven't completely cleared that up for you, James.
No, that's fine. I think the issue that we have is this is the first, we've started 4 teams. It's the first year we've ever had the junior
Right.
teams. So it's, this is where we're just trying to, I mean, we've stopped all heading. We were having no heading whatsoever. We've not had many friendlies. It's all new. So any information that we can get is totally beneficial, So that's what we're here for, really.
Lovely. Well, thanks for joining the call. And I hope by the end of the call, we've given you a lot more information that will help you with your coaching and your understanding. I'm just going to have a look at some of the comments in the chat, because I've asked people to make some comments, so we don't want to move on. But I have an issue. Heading is allowed from under 13, but not allowed in training until under 14. Why not have the same? So actually, heading is allowed in training, 1 session a week with a maximum of 5 headers is the FA guidance. So once the heading comes in, and even at under 12, when that rule, so when the under 9 rule change has gone all the way through, and it's just primary school kids who are not heading in training and not deliberate heading in matches, from the age of 12, you can do 1 session a month of headers in training with a maximum of 5 headers. Now, that's a really loose guidance, because as I've already alluded to, it's very hard to monitor that. But yeah, the guidance should marry up with the rules, essentially.
I think, Lou, as well, the guidance, it's guidance, it's not fact. The suggestion from the FA is that at under 13, potentially 1 session per week, but it's not a hard, it's a guidance. It's they hope that people will do that, but it's not breaking a rule not doing that. So we just have to understand that it is only guidance right now. Yeah,
absolutely. Danny, I like that. What if the goalkeeper saves it with his head? Well, not seen it happen, but I believe I would be right in saying that it would be a free kick from the edge of the 18-yard box or the goal box, from the nearest point. Now, from that, I imagine they would take it from directly in front of the goalkeeper. A rare thing that could happen, but thank you for raising it. Do you think that grassroots coaches know about these guidelines? I absolutely don't think they know about these guidelines. Was that you, Nick? Am I answering your question? Yeah, I absolutely don't think they know about these guidelines at all, because it's not part of coach education.
What do the guys on the call think? Do the coaches who are doing the teams, what is the awareness? You guys on this call are obviously leaders and are very proactive, but what about the regular coach, your parent and things like that? What do we feel that they know about the guidelines?
I think it's probably mixed. I'll be perfectly honest. I think our club or the FA have done a good job the league, have done a good job in getting the notifications out there.
Yeah,
I think, as James mentioned, there's maybe a little bit of confusion because the guidelines says one thing and then the league have said they want to do another thing. Right. I think it's probably a little bit easier at under 10s as well, because you can just sort of say, look, there's no heading, and that's that's the rule. I think, as you mentioned, with the other age groups, it could be difficult to maybe monitor it, can't it, and see who's doing what at what time. But no, I'm a relatively new coach to this, and I feel that the communication's been pretty good, actually.
How was it given to you, the communication? Where did you?
All via email. But I mean, I've like I say, I'm new, so I've been desperately trying to register all players, and I've been looking at all the communication quite a lot. So, whether some people have been doing it for a few years, they're inundated with emails. I don't know whether that's necessarily the best method, but for me, it has worked. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Tell you what, if you're new and you're registering players on a complete sideline, whole game system, oh my God, what a stress every year. I've got to do 35 kids on that system before the first match is on the 8th of September, and I'm just putting it off, but I've got to do it. I've just seen a comment in the chat here. Craig, we don't allow headers in training, full stop. We get asked regularly if they can header the ball, and we say no. So I'm really intrigued to ask you, Craig, do they ask you why? Have you ever been questioned on why you've given a blanket no to heading in training? I'm just reading through on the chat. So we've got Richard. We don't let players head in training. And in a game, if there's a header, it's an indirect free kick. So our boys don't do it. Plus, I want the boys to keep the ball on the floor. Yes. We have some younger girls in the under 12s who will be going into year 6. So some will be able to and some won't. Now, that is hard to manage when you've got a dual age group where one rule for one. I've got in training this year where some of my girls are playing in the under 11 league and they've got to play offside. Some are playing in the under 10 league and they don't. And so having a group of kids you train that have different rules on match day is a real challenge. Yeah, Richard, I agree. I think it's really important that the coach and the ref talk to the players and explain before the game. And this season with these new rules, that's going to be more communication, transparency is going to be the key to it being successful. Okay, I'm going to stop scrolling through the chat. I'm going to move on. Please do feel free to keep putting your thoughts into the chat. I'll go back and read through them shortly. Okay, so our question to you guys, and obviously you're quite proactive because you've come on this call today, which would suggest to me that you might already have some of the answers, is why do you think the FA have changed the rules for the under 7s, 8s and 9s, and that rule will over the next 3 seasons be implemented with every primary school child? So why do you think that's happened? And please feel free to unmute and chip in, or if you want to, write in the chat. Okay. So Richard says, we explain to the players and the parents about the long-term implications of heading at a young age. That's really good, Richard. And what do you say are the long-term implications? James plays the ball along the floor.
These are all Middlesbrough. They're all copying Middlesbrough this season with playing like this.
I just say, no, unfortunately, we're not allowed to header in the games, so we don't allow it in training. Any information I've received, I always pass over to the parents in the WhatsApp and a private Facebook group. Great. And I think that's so important that the parents, we know, I'm sure we all have this common situation of the parents who are mini coaches on the sidelines, who shout at their children, who, you know, play a very vocal part in the match day experience. And if the parents understand why the rule is brought in place, they will be supportive of that. A lot of the time, it's just that they're not informed. Richard has said he explains dementia, brain damage, and life-changing injuries. I'm super impressed, Richard. You can join the HeadSafe football team. Okay. So interestingly, I've now been working in the kind of brain health contact sports field now for a few years. And we started our HeadSafe football journey focusing on that dementia, brain damage kind of side of repetitive head impacts. And the research that is now coming out suggests that there are actually short-term implications from heading the ball, which Nick will go through with you in a moment. But if we focus purely on that long-term situation, what we find is that people don't necessarily buy into, I'm going to do something today that affects me in 20 or 30 years time. In the same way that I'm going to make a blanket statement here that we all in this call have gone out and probably drank too much alcohol, knowing that we would have a hangover the next day, but we didn't really care. And it's that same kind of, well, actually, I want to live for today. I love playing football, and it's so far into the future that I'll worry about it in the future. Sadly, the damage that gets done actually happens while people are young, and it's irreversible. So that's why we're trying to have these conversations. But what we're finding is that when we talk about the short-term effects, we're getting a much more kind of open attitude to the messages that we're conveying. So yeah, that's where we're at, really. Anyone else? Let's hear from James. I had an adult player only 4 weeks ago who had a severe head impact and the concussion that he suffered for 4 days with severe and complete memory loss. I mean, concussion has a spectrum from mild to severe, and that one sounds like he would have lost consciousness and actually could be up to 6 months where he has to be very careful about his screen time, his activity, his sleep, his patterns. And the good thing about concussion is that we follow the return to play protocols, which are for all grassroots sports across the UK. If we follow the return to play protocols, there is a recovery process in place. And so hopefully your adult player will follow those protocols, will not be returning to sport until they are fully recovered. With our message, though, we are really talking about those head impacts that don't have symptoms. So concussion, we see concussion, it causes concern. Everybody stops, the game stops, the parents are concerned. We've done our first aid training. We can call the doctors and the medics, and everything gets dealt with. With the head impacts, where there are no symptoms and no one's really aware of the fact that it might be doing any damage, it's almost like a hidden injury. And that's where we're trying to address reducing heading in training. And that is, as I've said at the beginning, our core message. Nick, was there anything you wanted to add before we move on?
Yeah, with Richard, I'm really interested if you could talk about this. Is how do you explain the brain damage, life-changing stuff? Do you explain it to the players or to the coaches? Because we're continuing to learn how best to talk to them about the brain in that sense. I don't know if Richard can come on and speak.
He's typing at the moment, so I think we just manage the chat.
It's a really cool challenge to talk about it.
It is. And that's where we're wanting to learn from you, actually. This challenge that we have we think quite a strong curriculum for working with coaches, and our experience with coaches has been that they are completely open to the message that we're giving, and they want to put player care at the forefront of everything else. What we're learning is, how do we get the message to the parents? And also, depending on the age and stage of the player, how much information can we give? You know, we never want to give this message with fear. We don't want to put someone off playing football. We love football ourselves. We're football fanatics. And so we want to get this kind of common sense precautionary approach across, but without fear. And that's a real delicate balance for us to get. Richard's typed an answer. I was exactly the same at the start. I thought heading has to be a part of football. If you stop heading, it's ruining the game. But after reading more about it, I realised there's more important things like players' health. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you, Richard. Really appreciate your contribution in the call. Okay, should we move to the next slide, Nick?
Yeah.
Okay. Over to you.
So what's happened over the last 20 years, I began this journey, unfortunately, 20 years ago in America. America is ahead of the game in terms of protecting children and making it's a safer sport. They stopped heading under 12s about 15 years ago. There's been so much science now about the impact of repetitive heading. And this is the science. This is a simple part of what happens to your brain when you head the ball or you have a knock on the head. So basically, there was a great YouTube video of this. Basically, as you make contact, your brain goes forward, back, forward, and it just moves, and it can clash against your skull. It can result in tearing in the brain. We saw in the World Cup people like Nico Williams from Wales. I think Nico Williams stopped a ball with his head and basically collapsed, was down for 7 minutes. They picked him back up and played. But this is the simple way of looking at it. The brain collides with the back of the skull and bounces inside it. So absolutely simple. It doesn't, when you're a young player, your brain is not formed as well as an adult. It doesn't mean that when you're an adult, it's safe. But as a young player, there's more movement and there can be more damage can be formed there. So just looking at the diagram, you see the acceleration and deceleration. Your brain basically, we weren't designed for the brain to go back and forth, which happens with an impact, happens in boxing with a punch, happens in a car accident. It's the same sort of impact on the brain. Okay, Luke, next one.
Yep.
the biggest study that was done on this was a professor called Willie Stewart. We're working with Willie this weekend down in Cambridge. We're doing a big game for neuroscientists. We want the science to come onto the field. But this was supported by the FA, and it showed that footballers were 3.5 times more likely to suffer from a neurodegenerative disease. The study was of professional footballers. This is only 5 years ago, and now there's been more studies of young players, grassroots players, non-league players. The really disturbing paragraph is the second paragraph, that it showed you were twice as more likely to get Parkinson's, 4 times more likely to get MND, and 5 times more likely to get dementia. Where we believe it's caused by heading is that goalkeepers have no increased risk of developing neurodegenerative disease. Weirdly, they're more likely to suffer from concussion, but they're less likely to suffer from a long-term brain injury which leads to disease. The big question, and this is going to see how old you guys are, if you look at the picture, can you name both players or one player or any of the players? I'm just wondering whether I'm the oldest person on this call, Lou.
I'm going to bet that you are. I'll give them a hint. I think you're more likely to get the player wearing white if you were to guess. Well, yeah, I think so.
Anybody get any ideas on the 2 players?
Looks like George Best in the chat.
Wow, Kieran, I'm not saying anything. I'll wait for another one to come up to see if Richard's got the same one.
Richard's just typing. We'll just give him a couple more seconds. See where we're at. George Best, but not sure on the other. McQueen.
Interesting, Danny. Interesting, because Gordon, the same thing as. So the 2 players are Manchester United's George Best and Middlesbrough's Bill Gates. That's my dad, who unfortunately fell into this category of developing a neurodegenerative disease. He had what was called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which shows itself in dementia. But this is what I grew up with, seeing my dad tackle. My dad never had concussion, just out of interest. He never ever had a concussion. Gordon McQueen was the same. Yeah, Danny, if you can see me, you can see that I didn't get my dad's genetics on that. The joke is I got his big ears and big nose, but my dad, Bill, played for Middlesbrough 333 times between 1961. He made his debut just turned 17 and played for 13 years, only one club from there. So this is why we do HeadSafe, as part of his legacy. Okay, Lou, any questions on this, on the science part of this in terms of the numbers? They are quite scary in terms of looking at the long-term impacts of heading the football. Danny, I'm going to be last.
Did they look at positions at all? I know you mentioned goalkeepers, but was your dad a defender at all? Or?
Yeah, so we actually just took that paragraph out. We changed the paragraph today that so the old players, my dad's era of the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 5 times more likely as a central defender and a central attacker. Why would that be? Who asked the first? Sorry, who asked the question? I didn't get the name of the.
That's Kieran. Sorry, I suppose it's just the nature of their position, isn't it? Clearing the ball being launched into the box quite often, I imagine.
And goal kicks, Kieran. You know, there was a lot more. Yeah, exactly, James. There was a goal kicks went a lot more down the middle. We're going to come at. I don't know. We have any myths and facts, Lou. If we don't have it, I'll.
We do. Let's not give away the next slide. It's all coming up.
More heading as a defender, central defender, certainly in the past, but we are seeing some changing trends now on it. But yes, you're exactly right, Kieran, James, Richard, etc. That was my dad was a central defender, so the worst possible position, and we're seeing a lot of players now, be like Chris Nichols and things like that. We're seeing a lot of players from there. Okay, Lou. Okay, so this is the science as we can. It was at Ayresome Park as well, James. That was a cup game in 1971. So, Richard, we're going to come on to that question, which is really, really interesting question. It's on the next slide on there. So this is the journey as footballers. Every professional footballer played grassroots football. They all started playing in the amazing leagues that you guys are doing, coaches, teams, etc., etc. So everybody started there. The science again is now showing us that younger players, by heading the ball, we're starting to see they're doing tests the next day and the days after, and they're seeing that the more headers have a negative effect on learning in schools. And that seems obvious. If you're bruising something, it hurts and you don't do as well. So that it comes into cognitive testing and things like that. So there's lots of research happening around the world now, looking at the youngest of players and see what effects it has on their lives. So we've put it in as young players, grassroots heading in training. The science is starting to say that the next day and the next couple of days in school, their cognitive learning is worse than people who didn't head the ball. So it's interesting that this challenge is, and this is why it's so important, all of you on this call, to understand it's a young person's thing. It's not an old person's, which is what we're seeing in the press. As we move on, the more years of heading a football, the more problems are likely in the short term and long term. So some of the problems in the short term, if you played for 5 years or so, we're seeing now in the scientific testing different results for memory and being able to plan issues. And we're starting to look to see, is it having an effect on mental health of young players, of young people? And young people can be, 16, 18, those sorts of ages where they've played football for 10 years. They're involved in it. They've got a team. They're playing for the school team. These are some of the impacts that they're starting to show now with the scientific testing. And we are getting better at testing the brain. There's lots of great things now that we are looking at to be able to say, this is what it shows. And then the longer side of things are even more years of heading a ball. And this is what you've been seeing, I think, in the press, is this thing called CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. We call it CTE football dementia. And that has impact on mood, behavior, motor functions, cognition, etc. And it shows itself, it often gets lumped into dementia, Alzheimer's, etc. But it is a disease where we see something called tau protein, and it is caused by repetitive head impacts. So that's the science. Any questions on that? Because it is an ever-moving piece, but there's lots of it right now. Lou and I probably read 1 or 2 academic papers a day at the moment, Lou, that we're seeing.
I was going to add, actually, Nick, with the negatively affects learning after just a small amount of heading in training and games. They looked at over a season, and it actually affects your reaction time as well. So your ability to react and so what we're waiting for is that research that comes out to say that actually, if you have a heavy heading day or a heavy heading experience in a match or in training, you actually reduce your ability as a performer. So if you're going to be a less good player because you've headed the ball a lot, that's going to really start to turn ahead with maybe the Premier League. Because obviously if you're focused on the win, you need your players at 100% of their best. And if by having a heavy heading session, the science says their reaction times is not so good, then they're not going to be 100% their best. So that's an interesting kind of avenue of the science that's coming out. It's certainly something I'm keeping a keen eye on.
Just so you know, on our science as well, we're working with virtual reality now, as well as ways to head the ball without having the impact, having that brain going back and forward. And they're showing that it's helping learning because they don't have those knocks and the impacts from there. Is it something we agree with in terms of we've obviously tried to simplify this pathway from the youngest of players starting at 5 and 6 and going all the way through to 29, 30, those sorts of ages. If you've got any questions about this science, we can go a lot deeper into this. We're giving you a hope language that you can use with your parents, coaches, and players. So wonderful. Okay, Lou, next one.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
just going to
conscious
answer
of-
Danny. Danny's just put a question in the chat to say, could the league bring in a head height rule? I think, Danny, the problem with that is that there's no way of measuring it, and a rule that's difficult to measure. Well, you think about all the arguments about offside currently, you know, it's just too difficult to enforce. So I think that simply by removing deliberate heading at the younger age group is a lot easier for a referee to control. Sorry, Nick, I interrupted your flow. I'm just going to move on.
I'm conscious of everyone's time. We've got about 20 minutes left on it. So, Richard, I wish I could see people's faces on this one. You brought up a brilliant point about the old balls were heavier and soaked up water. So we call this the myths and facts. So the old ball, the argument is it was heavier, therefore it was more dangerous. So as we've looked at the research, the FA rule is the balls have weighed the same for 100 years now. I think between 16 and 18 ounces. What's that? 400 grams, Lou? I can't remember.
It's
yeah,
14 to 16 ounces. Right, they will weigh the ball before the match. Any sort of Premiership, Championship, International, UEFA Cup, the ball gets weighed, and it has to be the certain weight, has to be pumped up to a certain PSI, has to be a certain diameter. The FA stipulate that, and that hasn't changed as a dry weight before the match. That has not changed.
At the Qatar World Cup, Adidas advertised that this is the fastest moving ball in history. So the science, and again, we always go to science. These are not just our opinions, and we think we do quantify it with science. The ball weighs the same and moves faster. It's like a Tyson Fury punch. His fist weighs the same. It now moves faster. The argument is that today's ball are at least as dangerous. We would argue more dangerous. Mm-hmm. And so that it is a logic. I like to argue it, Danny, that I grew up playing with a ball called the Mitre Multiplex, and same with Gary Pallister, who we know very well at HeadSafe, and we would argue that ball was the one that was the worst, but the science doesn't support it. So today's ball is more, I would argue, more dangerous than any other ball in history because it's moving faster, players kick it faster, they're doing more of it, and it weighs the same. So happy you brought that up, Richard. It's something that, again, one of our myths that we got.
I will just chip into Richard, though. Obviously, the old leather ball did absorb water. So when it was a wet, rainy day, it would have got heavier. So we're not disputing that. But
it went slower. Because it was heavier, it went slower. And so, absolutely. Danny, it's a shame. I will swear that I've got Mitre Multiplex on my thigh. Brilliant. Okay, another myth is that good heading technique, it won't do any damage. And so when we do these, we can do this presentation on the field with your clubs as well. Basically, the argument is, well, if I know how to head it, it's not going to cause a thing. But as we've shown, the damage is caused because the brain moves to the back, to the front, to the back. And so it doesn't matter whether you've got great heading technique, your brain is still moving in the skull, which is causing it to stretch. We can get into the science of CTE, but it splits open, protein comes out, it clots over time, etc. So there isn't a safe way to head the ball. There's nothing you can do to teach the best a safe way to head. You can make them technically better heading the ball for football, score goals, clear the ball, etc. But there isn't a safe way to head the ball. And so sometimes we get told if we're not doing heading it up until the age of 9 or 12, then it'll make it worse for them, more dangerous. Yeah, we're not buying into that because there isn't a safe way to head the ball. Okay, next one, Luke. CTE being an old person's disease, basically what happens is we all play football as young people. We've caused the damage, we've had the injury. Over time, it gets worse. We were talking this morning, it's about, like, you imagine your knee, you're damaged when you're young, you're running, you're twisting, you're playing, etc. Later in life, you start to say, my knee's hurting. The damage gets worse. So this problem with heading is caused when people are young. So my dad didn't head the ball after the age of 29. His last game was against Leeds at the sold-out Ayresome Park. He didn't head the ball after that. But we saw the damage that it caused, the disease, was when he was in his early 60s. And so going back to that study, footballers 3.5 times more likely to get neurodegenerative disease. They're 50% less likely to have anything wrong from the neck down. because they're very healthy. They've been brought up as athletes. And so, again, looking at the science. The last one on these myths and facts, and again, happy if anyone disagrees, we're happy to talk more and share the information. The final myth that we've chosen, we have lots of these myths and facts. We don't deliver sessions on heading, so our players don't head the ball very much. So this is when we've done our research on this. I think that so many leagues, so many coaches are doing an amazing job of not doing set heading drills, as I would call them. But as we've been watching young players, they're playing much more. They're playing for the club team. They're playing for the school team. They're with their friends playing pickup. They're playing other sports, etc. So if you imagine on a training night, 3 or 4 or 5 contacts with the ball with the head, and that might be something in warm-up, it might be head tennis, etc. As we've multiplied it forward, that's about 1,000 or 1,500 head impacts for a year, because they're playing more. We've got great fields now with 3G, 4G, etc. Great coaches, all of those things. You multiply that 1,500 headers over 10 years, there's 15,000 headers by the time we're 16, and this is by not doing many headers in the game. So that number, and the science is showing that the impact, the disease is caused by the cumulative amounts of headers. The velocity plus the amounts causes more damage. So I know that we're all doing so much better with not doing heading, but just doing a few every day or a few times a week, the multiplier effect becomes dangerous. And again, it's a criticism of the amazing North Riding and you guys, that you're creating such a great environment that the kids are playing more football than ever before. Mm-hmm. So if we look in the professional level, there's more heading today than there's ever been in football. There's more of everything because it's faster, stronger, etc. There's less goal kicks out of the hands, but there's more crossfield balls, there's more corners, there's more free kicks. And so this thing about less heading, and we don't deliver heading, unfortunately, the science and the research is not supporting that. Any questions on our couple of myths and facts that we put in there?
Just to add to that, Nick, as well, the seasons are longer because there's more teams. Yeah. As you said, we've got Astros, so we're not got these long winter breaks. Yeah. Kids also go to summer camps now while their parents are at work. You've got more tournament season. So kids don't really get a break as the year goes through. And James has said, I suppose that could be true if players play for more than one team. Absolutely, James. I think that lots of kids do play for more than one team, even if it's just their school team and their grassroots team. Lots of them go to like academies and development centres now. And, you know, a lot of these sporty kids don't just play football. They also do other sports where head impacts are an issue. So, yeah, I think it's a much bigger problem than just I coach these kids once a week and I don't do heading. You know, the actual experience of that child over 7 days, 52 weeks and 16 years is thousands of head impacts. That's the reality.
Okay, Lou, we have about 10 or 15 minutes, Lou, so we've got to crack through.
Cracking on, sorry. Right, next one. Okay, this one's on me. So this session was targeted to the club and welfare officers. So I went on the FA website and found out what are the roles and responsibilities of club welfare officers. And fits really quite nicely into those roles and responsibilities. So first of all, it was to be clear about the club's responsibilities when running activities for children and young people. So if your responsibility as a club is to protect players, then HeadSafe and the messages of reducing heading and training fit into your roles and responsibilities as a club welfare officer. And the second one is to help club personnel understand what their duty of care is towards children and young people daily. And of course, that really is talking about the kind of safeguarding and sharing of policies and reporting. And with that fits heading guidance. Heading guidance is there. And so as a club welfare officer, I think we have a role to play in sharing that guidance and sharing HeadSafe information. So they're my kind of highlights of the role that you're doing. What we hope to do this evening for you is give you some tools and information to support you in your job. And after the call, we're available by email, or you can go through Claire. And if there's any way that we can support you to fulfill those two roles, we would very much want to do that. Okay, next one.
Yep. So we choose, the way this will change is if all stakeholders in football have one voice. And so we specialize in coach, players, sports scientists, etc. So if you're doing coach education, what we do, and we've done about 1,000 coaches now, Lou, from professional level all the way down to grassroots. We share the science. We're not trying to scare people. We're just showing this is what the science is now telling us. So we didn't know much about cigarettes 50 years ago. We know a lot about that. We didn't know much about head impacts. We do now. The big message we want to get across, and I think all of you on this call are so proactive and open to this, it's a young player disease. What we're seeing on Sky Sports is that this old player died of this, of whatever it is, but it's all starting with young player stuff. So anything we can do in the from 5 to 16, from 16 to 30, etc., we want to be important there. We want to plan HeadSafe sessions. So if you're doing any heading, and this is not just the under 9s, but as we go further forward, you know, let the coach know that they're planning everything. What was happening in the professional levels, a lot of head tennis, tech ball, set pieces, etc., and they weren't counting that as heading. So it was quite. We would recommend clubs look at a policy with regard to that. So the FA have brought in their policy. I would suggest from the welfare side of things that as a clubs, you start to look to say, this is what we want to do. We want to reduce heading in training. And again, that's us. We're not trying to ban heading. We're just saying that we know 90% of heading of a footballer happens in training. So if we can reduce it in training, that's a fantastic thing. Last one is an amazing, I was in America for 20 years. And so I saw girls soccer start a lot longer. I'm so loving that so many girls are playing and it's rapidly growing. The science is slightly different. Girls, again, limited science for the girls in football at the moment, but girls recover more slowly from head impacts. They recover more slowly from concussions. And so we have to look to see now this massive growth of girls' sports, how we protect the females so it doesn't become, in 20 years' time, we have a generation of the first-time footballers who are now all suffering from potentially from brain disease because we didn't look at it from there. And the last thing in the red is a few headers a session leads to tens of thousands over 12 years. So with coach education, there's just a few things that we know have been successful and we can help you with. I'm doing one for North Riding coaches on Saturday morning in Gisborough and talk about these things. You guys are all coaches. What do you think about that? We'll spend 2 minutes on that. Would that help you educate all of your coaches?
James has said he thinks the information is amazing. And yes, we will definitely be sharing the presentation after the call. Let's see who else has put something in the chat. Please feel free to unmic. Got thumbs up from Vicky. Thank you, Vicky.
We can tell you that every coach I think every coach we've worked with, once they understood the science, were all receptive to saying we have a responsibility for these young players. We need to keep them safe. And again, we're not saying under 7s, under 8s, under 9s, it's banned in the FA. It will be by under 12s. We do worry that at 13, everyone starts doing 100 headers a night because they think they haven't done any heading for the first 4 years. But I think if we give the coaches the information, they've been fantastic. Okay, Lou, next one. I'm reading all the stuff.
I think James is unmuted. I'll just let James comment.
Okay.
I just think that I don't think we need to have the heading in the game until it comes into the later stages. You know, from the evidence we've got and what's been going on, I don't think we should be encouraging them to head the ball at all. I mean, we've seen a transformation in the game where we're playing the ball on the floor, and that's what we encourage through what we do. We do futsal. That's why we do it. The game's a lot quicker and better played on the floor. So
I agree. And if we give some info, you know, we tell the coaches there's two big advantages. One, it's a better game. I've loved seeing some of the kids' games over the last 2 years. It looks much better. But there is also there's a bit of science about protecting the players in this. Now we know that. Okay, Lou, next one, because I'm conscious of everyone.
Sure. Why won't it move on? Sorry. I'll click. Oh, there we go.
This is a real challenge on the player education side of things. We put down a couple of things, create a safe space where they can talk about it. The big one that we would emphasize with all of you is to encourage them to say that the brain is more important than your knee. You can get a new knee later in life. You can't get a new brain. So we've got the kids now who we've worked with in the clubs. If their head's hurting, they tell the coach now. They feel confident. It's not, if their hamstring's hurting, they definitely tell the coach. If they've got a kick, they tell the coach on their knee. So let's make it so they feel confident saying, my brain hurts today. And the chances are it's something very simple. They haven't slept well, or they haven't been hydrated, or they're under a bit of stress, but at least share that information. The challenge is, obviously, we don't want all the kids to think that if they head the ball, they're going to die. And I use that very dramatically. So we have to find a way of talking with the kids to say, treat your brain as more important than your knee or your hamstring or your everything, because you can't get a new brain. So if they feel as though they've headed the ball 10 times in this session for whatever reason, tell the coach and feel confident to talk about it. So break the stigma from there. Real challenge for how we educate players about it. So we don't want to make them think that football is a terrible thing, but we want to make them aware that, because they're the only ones really who know how many times they've had head impacts in the various sports and the various teams. Okay, next one, Lou. Does anyone know if Middlesbrough, Middlesbrough are winning, by the way? Type it in while we're going. A big one is parent education. It's really important that parents understand the reasons why we're doing this, because they get misguided into, you know, we've seen things in the press saying what they're doing this, they're making this into a nanny state, they're stopping the kids having fun, it didn't harm me. The parent education is just important to say, thanks, Craig, you've just spoiled my night on that one. we just want them to understand that they have a responsibility to protect their kid's brain. And again, where they would want to talk is if they feel that the coach is doing a lot of heading late in their training sessions, or the kid has played a game and they're 12 years old, and the kid has come home and said, I've got a headache today, or I didn't sleep very well, or these are the things. So we just want the parents to know it. I think we're going to be starting a couple of campaigns about HeadSafe and reduce heading in training, which will help all the public to understand why we're doing. We're not doing it for any other reason than just protecting the players so that the future of the game is protected. We're very worried, for instance, about rugby. We don't know how rugby can protect itself from head impacts and what that will do to the sport. And I think if we don't get it right with football, with the wrong education, or with not the enough education for parents, I don't want to see less players playing. I want to see more people playing. Okay, next one, Luke.
I think we're nearly there, Nick.
Yeah.
Last slide.
Do you want to do this one, Luke?
Yeah, absolutely. So this slide is just there to support you. If you wanted to come up with a HeadSafe policy that your club adopted or that your league adopted, what we found is that a policy that says don't do this and don't do that is quite an off-putting document, whereas a positive policy with positive policy language is more likely to get that buy-in. So we've given you, and you'll get this presentation, some examples of the types of statements that you might want to put into a HeadSafe policy for your club. So we will prioritise player care by educating everyone who has ever headed a ball about their brain health. So that's the peer part, and helping them to track how many headers they've had. We'll educate coaches so that training sessions that include heading will be well planned, and we make every header a learning experience. No heading in training at under 12. Now, by that I mean, if heading does remain a part of the game from under 12 and upwards, we can't completely negate it in training. But what we don't want to do is 100 bosh the corner in, central defender knocks it out with the head, bosh the corner in, central defender knocks it out with the head. What we want to do is say, actually, if you're going to header the ball and receive that impact, let's make sure that the environment is one that you're learning from. And we don't need to do it 100 times then. There are balls out there now that are lighter weight for training purposes. You could even get them to catch the ball, get their feet in the right position, anticipate the flight of the ball. We've got VR headsets. So there are ways of doing training without having so many impacts. We'll encourage uncontested headers to be controlled with other body parts. One of the things that makes me laugh in a non-happy way on the weekend is when the kid headers the ball, right? And everyone goes, yay, great header, Alfie! But the ball's gone out. So they've actually lost possession. So was it a great header? And actually, was anyone else contesting that ball? Could Alfie have brought it down with his chest, got it to his feet, and actually played and kept possession for his team? And I think a lot of the time that is the case. And so, yeah, just making sure that we give coaching so that players feel they have other options. Reducing the frequency of heading in a season. So that's just reducing heading in training. That's our core message. Reducing the forces of the experience by using lighter balls. You can use foam balls. Encouraging players to speak up if they have a headache, not just pop a pill and get on with it. You know, we actually take headache seriously. Encourage players to inform their coaches if they've had a heavy heading weekend, if they've played for the school or they've done other sports, you know, just to break that stigma. We encourage players to prioritize hydration before, during and after matches. And we'll post one message on social media each month reminding parents of the risks of repetitive head impact CTE. Okay, and that's that buy-in from the parents. So that's just a complete suggestion of maybe some statements that you might like to write into a HeadSafe policy. Right, I'm really conscious of time. It's probably my fault we've run over, so I apologise. Just put up on the screen there our charity social media channels. Please feel free to follow us. You've also got the website that's actually being rebranded and launched, I think, tomorrow or certainly by the end of this week. You've got Claire's email, and we'll be sharing a presentation. And if there's any way after this call that you think, actually, I need some more information on that, we've been a little bit superficial with the science because we didn't want to bombard you with that academic side of things, but we have it. We can get our hands on anything that you want. As Nick said, we probably read 2 research articles a day. We've kind of got our head in the sand, and that's why we didn't want to bombard you with it. But yeah, if you want science, if you want resources, games, please reach out and ask. We'd be more than happy to help you. Nick, Claire, anything else?
No, fantastic for everyone joining. If you've got any questions, you're typing on. I can stay for another 5 or 10 minutes or so, but really appreciate everyone's time from this. Again, we'll finish with how we started. We're not saying that heading should not be involved in football. What we're saying is that can we make it safer for children, for young players, so that later in their lives they can think of their football career as the best thing they've ever done, not something that's caused them problems later on. And again, available, you can go through Claire to find us. You can contact us directly. We're happy to come to clubs if you want to do coaching sessions for your clubs or do however you'd want to do it. And thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. And for making me laugh a couple of times with the chats. Claire?
Yeah, just want to say thank you, Lou, Nick, thank you for all the attendees. Very informative session. I'm sure you all agree. And hopefully you can take it back and feed it back to more people at your clubs. Let's spread the word, and we can even put another session on if there's an appetite for it. So yeah, thanks for your time. Any questions at all? If you want to get in touch with HeadSafe, like they've said, or through me, feel free. Thank you for your time, and good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Come on, Borough.
Right, Nick, I'm going to leave you to do questions because I'm going to jump off. Okay.
Thanks,
all
Lou.
right.
See you tomorrow.
Thank
Bye,
you, everybody.
Lou. Thank you.
Richard, I'm assuming you're saying no chance for Borough. With my dad playing for Middlesbrough for 13 years, I don't have the choice. I'm a Borough fan through and through wherever I'm traveling around the world. So yeah, they've got a lot of young players out tonight, so it's a very experimental for a bit of experience. But thank you for all of you. I do hope our paths cross, and really appreciate you guys being trailblazers in this, being leaders in just the education around why these rules are coming in. By the way, I have to tell you all, it's the quietest I've ever seen 15 people from the Northeast in any meeting at all. Love the chat. So Claire, Danny said, can you get a copy of the
yeah,
head
Danny,
rules?
we can send them out. They are on our socials. There's a poster with it summarised, but yeah, I can send out the FA guidance. That's not an issue. And if
It's
anyone
also-
has any other ideas of getting the the rules out there, we have emailed them. I think the FA have emailed people directly. So if there's any other ways and means that you think that we can get this through to people, because it's obviously very important with the season nearly upon us. The referees have all been educated on it, and they will be educating players, as and when in the games. But yeah, any ideas of reaching more people, then we're up for it.
Brilliant. I
But
think
yeah, I
maybe
can send out the guidance.
you and I talk early next week, and we'll put together a couple of things to send to everyone who's
Yeah.
been on
Yeah,
tonight.
not a problem. Yeah, cool.
The trick, Craig, is again to get all your players to treat their brain as seriously as they treat their ankle, their knee, their hamstring, etc. If it hurts or they feel as though they've banged it a few times, break the stigma and we'll talk about it. They feel confident to say, and with their parents, as Lou said, we're seeing too many times the kid says they've got a bad hamstring and they don't go to training. They've got a bad head, it's flick the tablet and suck it up and be strong. And it's not, the brain's more, the one thing we can't fix is a brain. I think, Claire, what a really good proactive group, wanting to do the right thing.
Very much so.
Credit to
Yeah.
everybody on the call of, football's
Just gonna
important,
stop
but
recording.
health is more important than